Coming up, we all know the European Union is run by unelected bureaucrats, don't we? Well, what if I told you that's just another Brexit lie? Before we get into it, please hit the like button, subscribe and get notified of new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Let me start by making the bold assertion that the European Union is a model of democracy. Its supreme political authority is the European Council, made up of the democratically elected leaders of each EU country, or the national prime ministers and presidents. The Council sets the political goals and priorities of the European Union. They're certainly not unelected, and they're certainly not bureaucrats, but they are the ones ultimately in charge. Underneath this European Council, the European Union itself is democratically run by its members, alongside the directly elected European Parliament itself. And when I say members, I'm talking about the democratically elected governments of each of the 27 countries that comprise the EU. All the treaties of the European Union, which form the basis of all EU laws, must be unanimously agreed on by the national parliaments of every single one of those 27 democratic EU member states. While the United Kingdom was in the European Union, every treaty was fully debated and passed by our Parliament in Westminster. To put it another way, there has never been any treaty change imposed on the UK by unelected bureaucrats. And neither could there be, because as an EU member, the UK has a veto. These treaties underpin EU law, and any changes have to have the unanimous backing of every single member country. This fact was overlooked during the referendum campaign by Vote Leave, with Farage's breaking point pictures and claims that Turkey was about to join the EU. For Turkey to join the EU, every member country would have had to approve Turkey's membership. And given the state of Turkey's democracy and press freedom under Recep Erdogan, it's unlikely any EU member state would have approved the Turkish application, let alone all of them. It was just another Brexit lie. So what about these alleged unelected bureaucrats that were imposing EU laws on poor old Britain when we were EU members then? Well, EU laws are drafted and passed by two bodies, the European Parliament and the EU Council. Neither of these bodies could be described in any way as unelected bureaucrats. The European Parliament itself is directly elected every 5 years by the citizens of all EU countries. The last European elections were held in May 2019 to elect 705 members of the European Parliament, or MEPs as they're known. 73 of those MEPs were from the UK, as each European country is proportionally represented in the Parliament according to the size of their population. Amazing, isn't it, that a parliament that represented 28 countries could still be less than half the size of the UK's own parliament, which currently numbers 1,458 MPs and Lords. The European Parliament can only pass laws in concert with the EU Council, and all their joint meetings on proposed EU laws must be held in public. Ah, I hear you say, the EU Council, they sound like a bunch of unelected bureaucrats. Well, think again, because although it's known as the EU Council, its legal title is the Council of Ministers. And it's exactly that. It's comprised of government ministers from each member state with responsibility for the particular policy area under discussion. In other words, the Council of Ministers is also fully elected and democratic. The EU Council doesn't even have a fixed membership. The ministers from each nation are appointed to the Council to frame and pass legislation relating specifically to their brief. There are 9 different councils that can be formed depending on the legislation concerned. Together with the European Parliament, these two bodies have the democratic power to accept, amend or reject proposed laws and regulations. And even though the UK had only one voice amongst 28 democratic member states, over 97% of EU laws adopted up until the Brexit vote were supported by the UK. So looking at the bodies that actually frame and pass EU laws, it certainly sounds a lot more democratic and less bureaucratic than our UK Parliament, with its bloated second chamber, stuffed with political cronies, bishops and hereditary peers. But let's now turn to the European Commission, because I suspect that's where the lie about unelected bureaucrats may stem from. The Commission is the equivalent of the British civil service, responsible for implementing democratic decisions, upholding and enforcing democratically passed laws and treaties, and managing the day-to-day business of the EU Parliament. The Commission can propose new laws, but they can only do this in close collaboration with the European Parliament and Council of Ministers, as only the Parliament and Council can pass laws. The European Commission is actually the servant of the EU and not its master. The Commission is headed up by an elected president, who is elected by an absolute majority of all the MEPs. The current president, Ursula von der Leyen, was voted for by over 50% of all MEPs. She and her commissioners have zero power to pass any laws at all. The purpose of the European Commission is to propose laws after preparing impact assessments, which set out the advantages and disadvantages of possible policy options. These impact assessments involve consulting with stakeholders and interested parties in national and local government, in industry and in civil society. The Commission also consults with experts for advice on technical issues. But there again, the Brexiteers had famously had enough of experts. But the point is, far from being unelected bureaucrats, the Commission's main role is to avoid bureaucracy by making sure that any proposed legislation is properly prepared for consideration by the European Parliament. And on top of that, national parliaments have the ability to express reservations if they feel a particular law should be dealt with at national rather than EU level. While we were members, Britain democratically helped to run and rule the EU, not the other way around. The EU is the sum of whatever its members unanimously agree it is. So for all those complaining about the UK being controlled by mythical unelected bureaucrats whilst we were in the EU, outside the EU we can only watch as democratic decisions affecting our whole continent are decided without us. Even though, with the bilateral withdrawal agreement now in place, most of those decisions will affect us just as much. Leaving the EU has actually meant a loss of sovereignty. We no longer have any democratic representation on our own continent. And what really makes the lies even more dishonest is that we have less democratic representation in our country than does the EU. 1. Our UK Parliament has 1,458 members, and most, 808 of them in fact, are unelected. One of them being Joe Johnson, after the Prime Minister appointed his own brother to the House of Lords. If that happened in the developing world, we'd be calling that out for what it is: nepotism and corruption. 2. We have an unelected head of state. See my last video on this subject. 3. We have the antiquated voting system of first past the post, but the European Parliament is elected by proportional representation. 4. We have governments that can bypass Parliament with the use and abuse of ancient royal prerogatives. 5. We have a legislative system whereby most laws are made by statutory instruments drafted by, can I say it, unelected bureaucrats in our own civil service, most of which become law automatically without a parliamentary vote. 6. We have a Prime Minister who lied to the Queen and unlawfully closed down Parliament for an extended period without parliamentary approval. 7. We had a referendum in which 2 out of the 4 member nations of the United Kingdom voted against Brexit. But unlike a similar situation within the EU, where any nation member has the power of veto, in the United Kingdom referendum on Brexit, those countries had no power of veto. So the truth is, it's the UK that has the unelected bureaucrats and the deficiency of democracy, not the EU.